Okay. All right. Three, two, one. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. Tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're tuning in and listening, we're joined with a great, distinct honor and pleasure to be joined by Mike Pollock. How are you, by the way?
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Aaron.
Always
And how are
welcome.
you?
I'm well. My
Excellent.
first question, which will lead into the rest of the fascinating discussion of all the incredible voice acting you've done, and I'm someone who's incredibly fascinated by voice acting myself, considering that I use my voice all day, whether I'm teaching or podcasting. I love everything about voice acting, by the way. But my first question is, before you became a voice actor, or before you got into voice acting, you were, of course, Mike Pollock. So my famous question that I always like to ask everyone: who is Mike Pollock? The hour is yours. Go ahead. The whole life story, everything you want us to
Oh,
know. Dig right into it.
I I hope he's someone entertaining because bottom line, I'm an entertainer. I've been entertaining for as long as I can remember, since I first set foot on a stage in third grade in a um, pageant for Roman history, wearing a toga and a crown of foil leaves of presumably olive. I don't know what they were. And school shows followed after that, and then community theater. And it came time to choose a career path, and I'd always been a fan of radio growing up. The theater of the mind fascinated me. I listened to classic DJs in New York in the 1970s and listened to old-time radio dramas from the 30s and 40s. And it came time to pick a career, and it was the decision between radio or theater. So I decided to take radio in school because radio seemed to be just a little bit more stable than the world of theater. So I studied producing for electronic media in college and worked at a radio station right in the middle of college, actually. And that led to some radio syndication gigs, a rock station job that didn't last very well, a news talk station job before that lasted a little bit longer. And eventually, after a few years in syndication, radio had enough of me. I was laid off, and I had that opportunity to take the voices that I worked on, doing commercials and comedy bits, make a demo tape, send it around, and various cartoon dubbing places liked my work. In New York, we had 4Kids TV. The 4Kids people were producing Pokemon at the time. So my first role of note that anyone might remember is an episode of Pokemon where I had a bit of a walk-on role as a character. And then the folks at 4Kids remembered me for 4Kids TV and the Fox Box, which came after that. And I also got a role in an anime called Demon Fighter Kocho, and that led to a relationship with NYAV Post and lots of networking to work with other studios. If you want to go all the way back, the first video job that I did was Little Tug's Big Adventure, recorded in some guy's house in a makeshift studio, but it was live action footage of boats in New York Harbor, and I was the voices of all the male boats pretty much, and that was fun. But the cartoons and led to video games and led to commercials and led to today. So I have been entertaining with my voice and also on stage and theater ever since I can remember.
Beautiful. Excellent. Excellent. I completely agree with you, by the way. I'm 32, turning 33 in July, and ever since I was basically a baby, well, in addition to my blindness, I have something wrong with my heart. So when I was a little boy growing up in near Maryland, actually, my parents spent plenty of time driving back and forth to hospitals with me, and they would put on talk radio at the time. And so my whole childhood was basically saturated with talk radio. And then as I just listened to audiobooks my whole life too, and then got into podcasting a few years back, because I feel that there needs to be more strong podcasts in the community that help people to come up to the stage, whether you're blind or sighted, either way, and share their story. And I think that this is something that we really need in the community. So that's kind of how I got into this too. It's just recognizing how much of a role listening to people talk is, and then being able to talk myself and being able to make a contribution in that way. I'll tell you, I'm glad you were on Pokemon and all those things. I was never, as a kid growing up, I was never a huge Pokemon person, but of course I'm familiar with it. A funny story I'll share with you off air another time about Pokemon. You'll get a kick out of it, but I don't want to say it on my podcast. But there's a funny little story about that. But so I'm purely curious, who was the character on Pokemon? If you even can remember who it was.
Sure, the first character barely had a name. He was Malachi's grandfather. His name in Japanese was Denjiro, but he was just Malachi's grandfather, and he ran a business, a courier business, staffed by Pidgeys. And that led to many other Pokemon roles as well, in addition to being Mr. Contesta, who was one of the judges, and characters that people might remember, Drayden and Karen. I was also the narrator, the interim narrator for a couple of years in between the first guy and the return of the first guy.
Yeah, I'm also fascinated by narration as well. And any film that includes narration, whether it's live acting or animation or computer generated, anything with narration, I got to tell you, that really pulls me in as a blind person. I really love narration when it's done well, right cinematography, script written perfectly. Narration itself is really can be a huge asset to someone's experience. So let's start to unfold some of the ingredients of voice acting. So if someone asks you, well, Mr. Pollock, what is voice acting and what are the ingredients, and how would someone get involved even to get their foot in the door? What would you tell them?
Bottom line is we voice things that can't voice themselves. That definition has changed in the recent years with the rise of AI, which I imagine we'll get to shortly. But when humans were in charge, there are scripts for things like commercials and corporate narrations and voiceover for radio commercials and TV commercials and within TV shows. And they rely on actors who specialize in voiceover to do them. A lot of people like to say, possibly ignorantly, you're not a real actor. And actually, yes, I am. Not only have I worked on stage, but voice is a specialization, not a restriction. I work with my voice, but just because you can't see me doing it doesn't mean I'm not acting. I'm acting with my entire body, no matter what I'm doing. My arms are flailing, my head is whipping around, but my job is to lift words off the page and bring life to the scripts that other people have written. And the challenge for a lot of people that want to get into this business, I love anime. I want to be an anime. Well, that's fantastic. But the key part of the voice acting world is the acting part. If you can't act, no one's going to be interested in hearing what you want to say, because your read will be flat and uninspiring, which sometimes is a character. But if you're trying to get people to buy famous beverages and soft drinks, you can't really have a boring read most of the time. So learn to act, because if you ever get yourself inside of a booth, the director is going to expect you to be an actor when you walk in the door, because they're going to give you direction. They're going to expect to get input from you and get reads that they might not have thought of. But it's a very collaborative process. But the base of it is an actor, being an actor. So learn community theater, learn school theater. If you can get someone to finance your learning experiences, hire a coach. You need a coach. You need coaching to do this well. But a coach will tell you how to break down a script, how to interpret the script, and eventually how to make a demo and market it to the right people so people can hear you and possibly see you.
You're absolutely right. You definitely are an actor. And if anyone tells you that they are not an actor, then quite frankly, you don't want their business. You don't want them watching anything that you voiced. But I think it is a lot more exciting to be a voice actor. I think that's a lot more special than being a live action actor, because our voices are far more special than what we look like as people. You know, you can be anything. You can be ugly, handsome, tall, fat, skinny. But if God didn't give you a voice, then who are you? You know, that's kind of my philosophy. So I think it's a lot more exciting to do some voice acting. I've actually done it a little bit in a volunteer sense. There's an organization sort of thing that helps blind people from all over the world get into voice acting, and they put together audio dramas. So that's one of my things that I've done, some of that audio drama stuff. And those can be very, very entertaining as well. So after you read a script and you kind of really broke it down, so how do you start actually coming up with some of these voices? Because you're very right. there are some people that say don't have a voice for podcasting and shouldn't be on the radio like us, or there's other people that should be actors but don't really have a voice for the radio at all. So how did you figure out that you have this beautiful and strong voice? And so what voices have you been able to come up with over the years?
As a kid, I would annoy people with voices all the time. And really, when I started in radio, there were commercials at the radio station, and radio stations are notoriously cheap. So they'll very often hire the people that are in there, that are already working there. So there would be, let's say, one of the earliest voices that I remember was for a commercial. We were actually, the production director and I were working the commercial. We were not particularly taking it very seriously because it was not a particularly well-written script. But he basically said, "Okay, we need a woman in this role to be the girlfriend of the guy. So you do it." Okay. So I basically took my falsetto voice, which was a little stronger back when I was a little younger. But Charlie, is that you? And that made it on the radio,
That's incredible.
unironically.
Incredible.
But
Yeah.
just voices I hear on TV, impressions. A lot of people want to be in voiceover because I do funny voices and impressions. It's a little more than that. Funny voices are one thing. Impressions are tough because if you're doing an impression of somebody who's already doing a role, they already have that role. So the chances of that role being available for you because you can sound like them, not very likely. There are use cases for impressions, but generally it's not the marketable skill that most people would want to have. But I would just hear classic voices on TV. The classic Ed Wynn voice is one of my go-to voices, who most people, kids today, would know as I guess Uncle Cartoon from one of the recent animated films. But this is the Ed Wynn voice. He sounds kind of like this. Originally, Ed Wynn was on the radio doing this voice, and he was in the original animated Alice in Wonderland from Disney doing the Mad Hatter. But that's his voice, or at least my version of his voice. It could be, I can get a little more accurate to him, but generally I like to go a little broad and get ultra cartoony with his voice. But just relatives of mine who don't know I'm doing an impression of them, they become a character. People around that I hear on the radio, they become a character. And it's those voices that bring life to the scripts if necessary, but also just using my regular voice or variations of one. I was just doing a commercial session the other day that dragged on longer than I expected. But after they got the sexy and mysterious reads and the kind of a New Yorkery read, they said, "Okay, let's play around. Do it in German." Okay, so we're doing this voice now. All right, then let's see what that comes up with. Sometimes clients want that, and when they do, I'm happy to oblige. But often they just want a very somber, straight read, and I'll happily give them that too.
Absolutely. I loved it all. No, I love all of your voices, but the voice that I appreciate the most is your real voice. That's the
Thank
most
you.
impressive to me, is the voice that God gave us to begin with. But the ability to entertain people with our voices is always powerful as well, too. But I think we were given our voices to begin with. You know, that's also an interesting thing to study, is people struggle all the time to do all these weird impressions and things like that. But that is deeply fascinating. So then after that, you started to get into some more. I mean, you've been on a lot of different TV shows and several movies. Why don't you kind of break down kind of how you paved your way up into the industry from there, if you would like, from radio to kind of where you are now? Yeah.
Sure. In radio, there was a little side work we did. There was a thing called the talent fee. If you did a commercial and it went to another radio station or more than one other radio station, you got a talent fee. Not much at the time, $100, but still, that was the first time I actually made money specifically for using my voice. I got paid, obviously, for working at the radio station, but any voices I did as part of my radio work there were included in my hourly wage. But you do a commercial, it goes out of house. Hey, there's some money. Cool. Someday I can make a business of that, I thought. And then when radio kicked me to the curb, I had done little jobs here and there, but nothing with any great regularity. But suddenly it became very necessary to find some form of income. So again, the Pokemon thing, the first real dub I did was very much learning on the job. I had an idea of how dubbing worked. I had never done it for real for someone in a studio. But I got there, and I am proud to say within a few minutes of being there, I figured, oh, I get how this works. There are lip flaps on the screen, and we have to match the lip flaps. Okay. And if it doesn't work, the engineer will do a little digital surgery to make it work. But cool. So that session went very well, so well that 4Kids had me back for more stuff. And by the time I did the first anime, that was I had the experience of the Pokemon session. So I went in there, and I was also doing some more learning on the job. On, I believe, Demon Cruller Kocho has some behind the scenes footage of the actors in the booth recording, so you can actually see me attempting to do what I eventually realized I could do. And after that, there was a lot of networking involved. 4Kids was starting up the Fox Box, and the Fox Box and eventually 4Kids TV had a bunch of shows, so they all needed actors to voice them. So I was in Ultimate Muscle, Kirby Right Back at Ya, Yu-Gi-Oh, which didn't air on Fox on the Fox Box, but 4Kids also produced that. Viva Piñata, Gogoriki, Yu-Gi-Oh GX, other shows that people might remember, and I can't right now. But the coolest thing, as we were moving from our New York apartment to another location, and I was filthy and mid-packing, the phone rang, and it was 4Kids saying, "We're looking for someone to do our promos. Are you available?" Well, sure. We mean now. Now? Hang on, I have to ask my wife, who's also packing up our house with us. And I got permission and washed my hands and made myself presentable and hopped in a train and went downtown and started doing promos. And they kept having me do promos for several years. Then beyond that, I was training with a voiceover coach who made a demo or helped me make a demo, shopped that around, and that led to commercials. The first real live commercial that I booked from an audition was for Capalbo's gift baskets here in the New York area. And that was a memorable audition because I auditioned. It was a very awkward audition, as I recall, because it was my first audition. But that I didn't book the first audition, but the second or third audition, I think I got lucky and booked this thing for Capalbo's and got sick right before recording. The one of the golden rules is don't book if you're sick, but that didn't stop me. I had a cold, but I also had a job to get to, so I filled a thermos with throat coat tea and went in kind of like this, which was good because the character I was doing was kind of yelly and neurotic and panicky, so I was able to hide a lot of the cold symptoms. Oh, the pressure, the pain, I can't take it. So that worked out really well. And then more auditions, more bookings, a lot of word of mouth. So sometimes I'd book without even an audition. But basically, what we freelance actors do, and acting is a freelance profession, both voiceover and on camera and on stage. You audition until somebody wants to book you, and then you go and do that job. And then when the job is over, either it's a one-day thing for a commercial, or it's a TV show or a movie or a play. They all eventually end in most cases anyway. And then you're off looking for another job. With voiceover, one of the joys of our business is that we can work multiple jobs. You can have 2 or 3 different bookings in a day or over the course of a week. So the jobs are short-lived, but they are often fast and furious. And so I'll have 2 or 3 different gigs in a week for a video game, for a cartoon, for a commercial, all because I am filling up the free time in my schedule because my schedule abhors a vacuum.
Yeah. Very fascinating. That's the type of thing I would have done. I no, a cold definitely wouldn't stop me either. Unless, of course, I'm really contagious and really have a fever and really don't want to get other people sick, then it might stop me a little bit. But probably not, though. I probably would have just, I don't know. I don't know. Could you voice act with a mask, with a surgical mask, if you thought? I wonder if you thought you had COVID and you didn't want to get anyone else sick. Could you voice act with a COVID mask over your face? Do you think you could? Probably.
Well, times got tough in the pandemic because everything went
Yeah.
remote kind of suddenly. But for things that were still in person, we would at least show up with a mask. Early in the pandemic recovery, I booked a couple of things in person that they insisted because when I started working remotely, I had a remote setup at home. I improved it greatly when the pandemic hit. I
Sure.
went from USB mics to an XLR setup with an interface and a little more foam on the walls to isolate. It's still not perfectly soundproof in here, but as long as there's not big trucks and construction going on and the landscapers stopping by, this is a functional space. But for COVID, we went into studios that were all retrofitted with air filters, and you would go in wearing a mask with the air filter on. Then you would take your mask off once you were sealed in the room, and the director and engineer would be on the other side of the glass, and you would be in the booth with no mask on. But if the engineer needed to come in to adjust something, you had to stop, put your mask on, clear, and the engineer would walk in, do what they had to do, and walk back out again. Then you get your mask off, you turn off the air filter because you'd hear that on the microphone, and then you do your session. And then when your session was done, your mask goes on, you get out. Then there was hand sanitizer at the door. They take your temperature. But generally, if you're recording voiceover, you'd take your mask off. I know some immunocompromised friends who are newscasters. They will have their mask on in the booth when they're alone in the booth, which is weird. But they work through the mask. You can kind of hear it, a little muffled, but functional. So possible, not recommended, but functional and possible.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I understand. Well, when you're doing these various interviews and auditions, what do you suppose really, lights a fire under someone's ass to hire a voice actor? What really are they looking for?
It's the sound they want. They may or may not know the sound they want. They may think they want a sound. Then they hear your sound. I didn't think of that. I really like that. So with auditions, one of the tricky things about being an actor and auditioning all the time is the rejection. Most auditions will be ignored at best. So you're constantly auditioning and occasionally hearing back from people. And folks who think they want to do it as a hobby don't get the challenge of doing it as an occupation. And after so many rejections, they give up. Nobody wants me. Well, the thing is, nobody wants you until they do. When you have the sound someone wants, they call you and say, we want to book you, which is the greatest feeling in the world. That never gets old. But it's the je ne sais quoi, the spark of something memorable, something unexpected. Unless it's a boring narration, then it's something that can fade into the background and not be noticeable because you should be paying attention to whatever's on the screen. But if you have the sound they want, or the sound they suddenly had determined they want, then you're the guy or the person to hire.
Yeah. You said something before too, when you were talking about the dubbing, you were talking about the various technology that's used in voice acting. So let's kind of break that down. So you said something that I didn't quite understand what you mean. I need you to expand on it, where you said when you were dubbing something, you had to match your speech to the computer generated to the picture of lips that you saw on a screen. What, like, that didn't really make sense. So like what do you mean? Really break that down.
Sure. When you watch a cartoon or any filmed thing, people are talking. Either they're humans with mouths moving in very intricate ways, or in the cheapest of cartoons, a mouth opening and closing, like the mouth of a puppet. And when you're dubbing, you have to match the flaps of the lips so that whatever words that are written in the script have also presumably been written to match the flaps of the lip, so that it looks like you're saying the same words that were originally recorded in the original language. Because animation, at least in the West, works one of two ways. There is prelay animation, where everybody records like a radio play, either together or separately, but you end up with an audio version of the story, and then animators take it and match the lip flaps to the sounds they hear. The opposite of that is dubbing, something usually produced in another language that they want to distribute around the world, so they have to dub it into the local language. So the flaps of either the live human on the screen, if it's a live action thing, or the animated character, the words are replaced with words that fit the flaps, or at least fit the duration of the dialogue, and that is replaced with the language of choice. Yeah. So for an anime, when we're doing it, if the director is a perfectionist, for every flap there is a syllable. The lazier ones, if it starts on time and ends on time, that's okay too. All right, fine. But either way, with the directors I usually work with, their fairly picky about how the flaps work, if there's a little break in the line. So I was saying that I want to say something else. When you're reading a line, you've got a break where that break is in the flap. So I was saying that I want to say something else is the way it should be. But if you say, so I was saying that I want to say something else, hold up, there's a break, there's a little gap there. Take a little break after saying and I wanna. And so you'll do it yourself, or the engineer, if the engineer is crafty, will use digital tools, usually Pro Tools or a fancy audio editing software, to chop and splice and squeeze and stretch and make the words fit. So ideally, the actor should do the heavy lifting, but very often, that was a little too long. Can we squeeze it, Mr. Engineer? Digitally, sounds maybe a little sped up but it shouldn't, and the flaps will fit even better.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, as a matter of interest, I also happen to be a French speaker myself, so I understand that languages, just because you say something in English, it takes a certain amount of time. Well, it might take longer in another language or shorter in another language, and then it gets tricky. Then it's more noticeable. If it's a dramatically different language than the original language, then it's a lot harder because then it's different units of time and that type of thing. So that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
And the thing to remember is that dubs are not translated directly. Usually, they're usually localized and adapted. So
precisely,
you'll paraphrase and expand or contract as you need to, or depending on the story, rewrite the story entirely.
Yeah. So have you ever needed to rewrite a script, or have you ever needed to severely edit a script to get a job done?
Almost always, if the translate, not every translator is a great translator, and every adapter is not a great adapter. So they think they're writing to the right flaps, but when you, the actor and the director and the engineer, get together and start dubbing it, not every line will fit. So the director has free reign to fix it. I'll sometimes chime in with a suggestion or two, or sometimes they'll go right to me with, you have a better idea for this? I said, yeah, how about this turn of phrase? Or how about this word instead? So it's, again, very collaborative. And then you rewrite it until it fits. And if that still doesn't work, fancy editing from the engineer.
Cool. Excellent. Really, really, really good. What would you say is the most, even for you at this point, what is your greatest, I guess, greatest challenge, or what would you say is the greatest and the most complex voice acting that you have either ever done or ever wanted to do in the future? What you could take that question in either direction.
Yelling and screaming, which is what I do a lot and what I'm known for. I'm known for having loud and boisterous voices, which is easy enough to sustain if it's not at the top of my voice and yelling at the top of my lungs. But in a violent video game, if the character is dying violently, you've got to yell at the top of your lungs. And if you've ever yelled at the top of your lungs, the more you yell, the quicker your voice fatigues and potentially gets injured. And by the end of the session, sessions normally max out at 4 hours, but if it's vocally stressful, about 2 hours. At the end of 2 hours, you're going to sound like this. I can't do this anymore. I need a lozenge. I have started a video game at least once with a sore throat because, again, I get sick. And I saw the nature of the video game. I got on the phone with my ear, nose, throat guy's office and said, hi, do you have any appointments later today? I think I'm going to need one. Sure enough, by the end of that session, I was very hoarse. My voice was very fatigued. I had an appointment at the doctor. He once said, yeah, you strained it. You'll be fine. Vocal rest for a couple of days. Shut up. But while we are there to give our all, we are being paid often large sums of money to scream our brains out. And you can't really fake that. You can use vocal tricks like opera singers use to make your voice loud and big and not get injured. For those of us who scream in video games, we scream until we are hoarse, and then we take days off, and then we go see our doctor to make sure we haven't done any damage. But whenever I do those, especially now as I age, I think, oh, I hope I recover from that.
So what video games have you voiced? What types of characters have you voiced in video games?
Most people know me as Dr. Eggman in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, which I've done for the past 20 years and counting. He's a very loud, big, boisterous voice. It sounds like this. Which, again, that's easy enough to do. Although a long session, that 3 or 4 hours, that gets worse. But sometimes, attack! That is not full volume. But when I do that for the video game, that's full volume. I can do 1 or 2 of those at a time and get away with it. But if he is deep in battle, that will take a toll on the voice. Other voices that other games that people would remember me for. Um, Pathfinder has been very popular. I've been in some of those. Um, Overseas is Mr. Meat in the I should know the name of the franchise, but it's a horror themed game. Scream something, I should look it up. But Google Mr. Meat, you'll find him. He's a deranged butcher character. And I've been doing him. I took that voiceover from someone else, I believe, but I've been doing it for the past couple of years or 3 or 4 years. And that's very popular in Central America and South America for reasons that are not quite clear, but okay, not going to argue with success. The Just Cause franchise, I think, was the one where I started sick and ended up sicker. The thing about these is that it's best for me to look them up and remember them. Check the Internet Movie Database; they have games in there too. But Sonic is the one that most people know me for. But any game that'll have me, yes, I will. Thank you very much. Oh, the other big one that I should remember, Batman Arkham Origins? No, Batman Gotham Knights. I'm not in Arkham Origins. I am in Gotham Knights as one of the gang of villains, or at least toughs.
Yeah, yeah. Really, yeah, that's really fascinating. No, and no, I'm sure you would never take it personally if I tell you the truth. The majority of those games and things that you've just said, in all honesty, I know they're great, but I either didn't watch it, didn't play it, haven't necessarily heard of it, but it's great. I'm sure it is.
I
Um,
understand completely. I am not a gamer myself, and folks who play games often
I
don't
used to
understand that.
be. I used to be. I was always fascinated by Assassin's Creed, that whole Ubisoft franchise.
Mhm.
That was fascinating for me. I never played the campaign on Assassin's Creed, but I always enjoyed the multiplayer. So there was some really interesting stuff from that franchise as well. Yeah.
Yeah, what I have to explain to people when I'm doing the games is that when we're in the studio, there's no console. There's a screen, but it's not for playing the game. There's no music. That none of that's done. We've got a script in front of us, usually a spreadsheet looking thing, either on paper or on a tablet, and we are doing a radio play with the director. We're not working a joystick and running battles and running through zones. We are providing isolated bits of dialogue to be assembled later into a game. So you don't have to be a gamer to voice games, but you kind of do have to be an actor, and that's where I specialize.
Yeah, yeah, that's really fascinating. And then that Mr. Meat, is that the one you said from the international one?
Yeah, it's based in Spain, which I guess, or based in one of the in a Spanish-speaking country, which is, I guess,
Oh.
why it's so popular out of the area. But
Hmm.
yeah, it has a life of its own that I had never heard of before. But as soon as I was announced as voicing Mr. Meat, fans have come out of the woodwork, often on Instagram. I don't know why that is either, but okay.
Right, but if you're so that's yeah, that's very endearing and very entertaining because if you're here in the States, well then how would these fans in Spanish speaking countries necessarily even know who you were to begin with? That's kind of
The,
strange.
the games are in English because I took Spanish in junior high and high school. That doesn't mean you want me voicing a game in Spanish. I'm looking up the game particulars while I'm chatting.
Oh, that's
Um,
fine,
but
sure.
the game, I guess there are Spanish versions as well, but the versions they book me and my English speaking colleagues for are in English. So I guess even if your native language isn't English, but you're playing the game in English, then that's how you're finding me. Okay, here's one. Mr. Meat Horror Escape Room is one of
Ah,
them. There's Mr. Meat 2 and 3. And for those watching at home, this is what Mr. Meat looks like.
okay. Yeah.
Thank you. He's unsavory.
I
And
see.
he sounds kind of like this and talks about my little mouse. And got a email from my agent one day, match this character voice. And I did. And they liked it.
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah, that's really fascinating. I also have a fascination with horror too. The whole, whether it's in a film, a play, a video game, that whole concept of horror is also goes right along with the voice acting, but it's also a deeply fascinating concept. The different things that we can get people to believe, just like the theater of the mind, as you were saying. Horror is really incredible. We can get people to believe anything we want, and it's quite powerful, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we're
Are
lucky,
you
nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, well, that's the fun of it too, is that when you're watching stuff like that, that it's all just great acting and just people just using their skills. I mean, that's really the most interesting thing. Have you ever played in a live action? Have you ever acted in a live action show that was like set to horror or like sci-fi? I'm also a huge sci-fi fan too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I've done stage work. I mean, the horroriest things would be a couple of live versions of the Rocky Horror Show. Arguably, maybe may or may not be horror. That's debatable for another time. And we did Dracula in high school. Um, who was I? I think, the ingenue's father, as I recall. Yes. Um, Arguably horror, maybe more romance and romancy horror, but no, nothing live action. A couple of live action anime dubs where there was some blood and gore. Uh, there was, I have a vague memory. Okay, there was, I think, some horror inspired New York themed movie that I dubbed that I don't remember now. So yes, but I can't pull it out of the old memory banks.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. All of this is very, very, very compelling. So you mentioned before, or you mentioned that we would cover some controversy, which in every industry, there's always the really interesting controversy that kind of lurks backstage in any industry. So what are some major debates, major philosophical debates, major controversies right now in the voice acting field? What would you say to that?
These days, it's the rise of artificial intelligence and deepfakes. Deepfakes are dangerous for many reasons, impersonating politicians and celebrities, and complete non-celebrities sample their voice and call their parents and play their voice back saying, "Hey, mom, I've been kidnapped. I need money." That happens. That's an ongoing scam. Don't fall for it. But for us, because our voices are available online because videos exist, folks who don't understand the nuances of copyright and consent and personal autonomy hear our voice, see that it's publicly available and downloadable, and think, well, since I can access it, I can have my way with it. And they sample our voices into AI engines and essentially create digital replicas of our vocal tract and puppet our voices into making our voices seem to say whatever they want, both savory and un. And they don't think that's a problem. When I confront them on social media, these AI bros, I say, well, how about if someone did that to you? Someone assumed your identity in your social media channel and started saying hateful things as if it were you. Would that not be a problem? And I liken it, I'm big on analogies. One of the big analogies is it's like your car. If you own a car, you don't want someone to steal your car. The operative word in this conversation being your. The car belongs to you. If someone takes it without your permission, i.e., theft, they don't have your permission to do that by definition, and you're probably not going to be happy about that. If you take your car for valet parking, you drop it off with the valet, there's an unspoken contract there. The valet is going to take your car, park it, and bring it back to you when you're done. He is not going to take your car for a joyride with his friends. That's not part of the deal. So when we voice characters, we respect the characters, or at least most of us do, which is why I don't take lots of random requests. Can you have Dr. Eggman say this Probably not. You're not Sega. He belongs to Sega. I voice Sega for him. So similarly with our voices, they're not in the public domain. We are small business people, actors. We sell our voices and our likeness and our acting ability as our product and service. Just because you can make a reasonable facsimile now in both body and voice doesn't mean you can. You can. I mean, you can, but you can't. It's
You
whose
should
voice
here.
is it?
Let me help you a tiny bit. You can, you're able to, Mr. Pollock,
Yes.
but you shouldn't, is what we should say.
Yes.
You shouldn't do that. Yeah.
If you have an ounce of empathy, you would understand that. But there are many people apparently on the internet without an ounce of empathy.
Well, and are they doing it? I mean, and I know this comes from, I mean, I'm just at this moment in time, at this one split second, I'm just at this moment, just simply a clueless podcaster. But so when people copyright your voice intentionally, is it always to be hurtful, as in always to be defamatory? Or is it just because some people are just so thrilled by the AI? I'm not justifying it, obviously, but is it that some people just become so fixated with the AI? They just want to see what they can create regardless, or is it all of the above?
It's a matter of perception, really, from the AI bros perception. Look what I can do. Another analogy is, hey, your shiny new toy is being powered by stolen batteries. Yes, they're running AI through its paces. I get that. I don't hate AI in general. Google Gemini and we talk all the time. But as far as taking a recognizable voice or face and cloning it just because you can, there are a lot of demonstration videos of, okay, here's the president saying something innocuous just to demonstrate the power of AI, or here's a famous movie star. For demonstration purposes, great. But fans will do it with recognizable characters, not considering or realizing that the characters are copyrighted, first of all. Some companies are more lax than others with enforcing their copyrights, but still, by taking that copyrighted character and the sound that we create to represent that copyrighted character, that's a problem. You're violating a copyright. You're also taking my voice and putting words that I never said or would not have agreed to say and just creating them. That's creepy, if nothing else. The AI bros will say, well, it's just for fun. It's fun when you're doing it to someone else. If I do it to you, is it still fun? You might not think so. You at that point might say it's creepy. I don't mess around with AI voice cloning myself for obvious reasons, but
nor would I. Nor would I.
But on Twitter, there are fake tweet generators. So a couple of times I have taken people who are intent on arguing for the innocuous benefits of AI. I'll say, hang on a second. I've created this tweet that looks like it's coming from you that says, I love to eat dirt and pick my nose. But it looks like you're saying it. Is that okay? Does that make you a little creeped out? It should.
And how do they respond? And how do they?
Fun.
And how do they? And how do they do these? You shouldn't even. I mean, I know as I sound silly by telling you, man, you shouldn't be wasting your time with these people. To some extent, you should be complaining to your agent, complaining to your management and the companies when it happens. But don't waste your time with these people. But it is fun to pester them, I'm sure. But do they ever get upset if you come after them though? Because that's kind of cool, actually. That's kind of interesting.
I argue to educate. Sometimes I change minds, but they're on the other side. It's internet trolling and flame wars. They're on the other side, dead set in their ways, and they're going to argue their side. So yeah, sometimes they get upset. They'll double down, or else they'll back off. Often I have a bunch of followers who'll take my side and say, "Oh, it was pretty funny what you did there, Mike." Great. I'm not trying to out mock the mockers, but I'm illustrating the point with replication. So if you realize what I'm doing and you say, "Oh, it is like that," and yeah, that is creepy, then I think I've made my point.
Well, sadly, we will always live in a society with creeps,
Mhm.
unfortunately. One of the things that I'm also, if I'm not doing this, if I'm not podcasting, I'm also teaching English as a second language. So I spend an enormous amount of time educating people, like you do sometimes. And a lot of them ask me, Aaron, they say, "Are you afraid that AI will take your job?" I say, I'm never more afraid of AI than people 400, 200 years ago would have been of the sewing machine and the various factors of industrialization. People adapt. You don't lose things. This is only my opinion. It's an opinion show after all. You don't lose things to AI. You don't lose things to industrialization. You adapt with the change. But on that note, what do you think? I mean, do you really think, in your professional opinion, never mind the hackers and the problem people,
Mhm.
is AI truly going to end up, disabling podcasting, disabling what you do? I mean, will there come a day where will we really live in that society with no podcasting and no voice acting? Because that would be sad.
Well, that's the thing. There are two main challenges in the AI battle for us. There are the hackers who don't have any professional business relationship with us and just take found audio, repurpose it, and make their own stuff. That's one thing. In the professional realm, our clients who pay us, hire us and pay us to voice things for them realize, hey, I can do this cheaper with AI. It doesn't have to be my voice specifically, but I know of at least one person who was doing some profile automobile advertising, and suddenly commercials voiced by AI, a different voice, but the same, selling the same product, replaced them. And I listened for a while and said, that's not who that's supposed to be. Hang on. That delivery is straddling the uncanny valley. That's AI. And it's happening more and more. We heard on TikTok videos, the famous TikTok narrators who sort of sound literate and sentient, but every so often a bit of a phrase of, this is me talking in the same way here. Then every sentence sounds the same. Every sentence has the same inflection. And then you realize every section has the same inflection because that's the only inflection that AI is capable of doing. That's not great. There are benefits there for stuff that doesn't have to be voiced by a professional, talented actor. Um, Software or apps that you're just calling to confirm your dentist appointment. You don't need a voice actor to do that. I'm content with a computer. Hello, this is your dentist office calling to confirm your appointment. That's great. And even professional stuff, e-learning, which is a genre, and lots of people are making big money doing that. But hi, it's time for your sensitivity training for your new job. That could be voiced by AI if it had to be. Um, so yes, the less, oh, how can I say this without disparaging many of my colleagues? The less creative aspects of voiceover, you can replace those. The AI is great for stuff that automated warnings for weather alerts, for example, where you don't need um, a human to do it. In the old days, there was no weather. There still is no weather radio, and in some cities, the NOAA phone line where you call up to get the weather. The National Weather Service people in the old days would have a fancy analog recording setup, where as part of their job, in addition to writing the forecasts, the National Weather Service forecast for Tuesday is cloudy and rain. We had one when I worked in radio in Syracuse. We would call up the weather line, and my favorite part of it was the weather lady on duty in the weather service. And this one lady, her name was Kay Witz. I hope, may she rest in peace. She's probably deceased now. Her job was to record the weather onto the weather phone once an hour. And even though she did this once an hour, she was always taken by surprise when she had to do the time check. So every phone related weather forecast was started this way. The National Weather Service recording the weather at 2 o'clock. You knew you were going to get the time. You do it every time. But still, it's totally tangential. But still, that's now
I
replaced.
love that. It's
Thank you.
not. Did you ever pull her aside after work and say, "Hey, Miss Woods, just want to tell you something. It happens every hour. That's why we call it every hour."
She
Has
was
she
not at
ever?
she was not at the radio station. She was at the National Weather Service office at the
Well,
airport. So, but I could have called her. I figured out who she was, but no, it wouldn't
uh,
have helped.
no,
She
probably,
was
probably not. That's why they call it. That's why they call it hourly, because it
she
would
was great
happen
at the
every
weather,
hour.
but she was barely literate, and I'm sure that she really
Okay.
didn't care that she couldn't remember the time. But
Let's
nowadays,
but hey, you know what? Mike, let's give her credit, right? Though, although that is important to do the weather NOAA weather reporting and things like that. That part is important. So maybe she was more focused on the data or remembering the various conditions. So I can understand where there would be some
yeah,
confusion about that one. That's probably what that was. Yeah,
yeah,
as fun as it is,
but
but
just that it
yeah.
was so predictable. Because I had to call every time during my show to get the temperature, and I would always say, "Is she going to do it? Oh, good, she did it." But now the weather people have been replaced with this. Hang on, wrong button.
Oh, sure.
Voice synthesis. Same
Hmm.
information programmed into a computer, and the computer reads it. So all the weather forecaster people or whoever is left doing the weather forecast, they type it up, it goes to the computer reads it out, and it goes out on the radio 24/7, no human interaction. So that's a perfect use of better voice synthesis in the
That's
form
an
of AI.
appropriate. I would say
Yeah,
that's an appropriate use of artificial intelligence. Sure, sure, sure,
yeah.
sure.
But right now,
Also,
our
yeah,
unions and stuff are fighting to make sure that our actual clients don't take our voices, rip them off, and
yeah,
start using our voices without our consent or
right.
replacing us without our consent.
When look, one thing that I would want to know, and some people in our audience around here in the Aaron's Opinion family are very vested in this interest as well. Obviously, you're doing an amazing job as an actor, and then when they take your voice, we need, and I know what the follow up is going to be. Well, then they'll just find other ways of getting around this. We need to write software where once your voice, Mike Pollock's voice, is locked into a recording that's professionally used, the software needs to not allow that voice to be downloaded. There needs to be some right
Mhm.
technological safeguard. How is that not possible? Is what I'm wondering.
Technology, just there's two big defenses we could have. Laws are one thing, but laws always lag behind technology. But we have trade groups that are going into Congress and saying there should be a law, and they're working on that. Technologically, yes, you can put protections, but are the protections defeatable? Is the are all the browsers of the world compatible so that they'll recognize the protection and pay attention to it? Not yet. So the protection isn't foolproof. And there's so much existing audio out there, YouTube, anyone. YouTube is all full of stuff that you can rip the audio out of and think, well, I can rip it, I can use it. And one of my hobbies is listening to foreign radio stations, which may or may not be geo blocked and have to have a VPN to get through to them. But I take them, DVR them essentially, but also improve upon them. I punch up the audio with a little compression. We follow show tunes, so there are some show tunes my wife doesn't like, so I flag the audio and tag it so that it automatically skips the song she doesn't like, and it's all done for personal use. So it's hidden behind protective podcast feeds. You couldn't find it if you tried, as far as I know.
I'll
But
try.
it's for personal consumption. That's okay.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm violating copyright, but I'm the only one violating the copyright. Me and I think one of my friends occasionally gets some of the benefits of what I do. But it's for me. I'm reusing the content that doesn't belong to me, but it's for my own personal enjoyment. I'm listening to it later and making it sound a little better
yeah.
and suiting it to my purpose. That's
Fair
I'm not a
use.
lawyer, but yes,
Getting
I,
in the direction of fair. That's actually probably not fair use, but it's getting in that direction. You can make the argument. You can throw it out there. That's almost
yes,
fair
but
use.
also,
Let's
as I
say
love to point out, it's up to a court to decide what's fair use. So yes, the
that's
fair
true.
use precedents have been set, but if a judge says this isn't fair use, what are you nuts? So yeah, it's fair personal use. You don't need to know about it. Forget I ever said it. But when if technology exists to keep me from doing that, I guess at that point I said, well, that was fun. Not doing that anymore. Uh, but yeah, the technology has to be built in to the audio platforms to make that a little safer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm guessing question that I never would imagine that I would ask myself is, so I guess should I not allow embedding on my videos here on YouTube? I guess should I not allow that in the when I tick those boxes at the end, should I not allow embedding, I guess? Or do I allow it?
Mm, if it's on YouTube and if it has a URL, there are unscrupulous tools that are available to scrape the
Yeah.
audio. So YouTube, just by its very nature, because it has to have files that are
Yeah.
accessible for people to see. The interesting thing is that all the unscrupulous websites that let you scrape the audio are so full of spammy pop-up ads that you feel dirty using them. It's like, oh, I didn't want to see that. Oh, no, I don't want to go to this website. Ugh. So you're taking your life in your hands, or your digital
Yeah.
life in your hands, to scrape that audio. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's at the moment you may not see anything in your lifetime. Depending on that,
Yeah.
I expect you live a long time. They may not solve this by the time you're old and gray.
Probably not. In my case, I don't mind because see, from the perspective of a podcaster, which is what I am, at least in my own opinion, it kind of, in a sense, obviously, no. If someone wanted to copy my voice and defame me and slander me, no, not okay, obviously.
Mhm.
But if someone wanted to download my voice and give me more downloads on my podcast, then I kind of benefit from that. Or if someone wanted to embed my audio and kind of listen to it later for their own personal use, my knowledge would be helping them. So I totally defend you, by the way. And then I also understand where it's sort of a double-edged sword in both directions. There's kind of excuses either way. I can see where I would benefit or where I could easily get hurt either way. So it's painfully interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Redistribution is one thing, and if you're okay with redistribution, that's great. It's regeneration and
Yes,
turning
that's the
stuff,
difference.
Hi, I'm Aaron, and in my opinion, I hate the Swedes. What?
Right. That
Why
would
would you
be
hate Swedish people? You've never said that. I don't expect you would. I don't expect I would. One interesting little loophole in my private podcasts, I had two public podcasts. One I did for an ethnic broadcaster because I liked his show. And I said, wouldn't you like a podcast? Because I'm recording it for me to listen back to later. I could just as easily take that private podcast, make it public. And he said, what a great idea. I got his permission. I became his podcaster. He gave up on his show. He retired. It's fine. It's over now. But also, a little known fact, probably among people, mostly because people don't care. Output of the federal government in the US is public domain almost always. So if a publication from any federal agency, that's in the public domain. There are unscrupulous business people who will try and sell free pamphlets from the government because technically that's legal to do. Don't do that. The US Census Bureau for a while had a podcast. I think it used to be a podcast until they gave up and just posted it on the web. And it's little short featurettes, whose name I should remember now. It's not Counting America, but it's something like that. It was on their website. It was posted as files for radio stations to redistribute. And I said, well, gee, with a little light white hat hacking, I can actually download that and turn it into a podcast and make a podcast out of it. And because it's from the federal government, it's public domain, and I can do that. It had like 4 listeners. I did that for a while. They eventually, not because of me, they didn't care that I was doing that, but they gave up on that feature. They created a newer feature with more multimedia things, and it was only 5 things a month instead of 30 things, one for every day. And I said, cool, I'm going to make a new podcast based on this. They eventually gave up on that. It lasted about 6 months and nobody cared, so I stopped doing it. But it was a real live podcast for the public. Nobody listened, but I listened, and at least in order for me to listen, it was easier to do it by podcast, and I might as well share it with the public because I could. And there was nothing against the law. I even asked the Census Bureau, can I publicize that, more officially? And they said, yeah, we'll get back to you. They never did, and they stopped making it. But that was perfectly legal for me to redistribute that. Again, nobody cared, not the people making it or the people listening to it. And now that it's gone, it's just the only thing that's left are these spam emails that I get from people who found my administrative email for that podcast. And I get emails from that saying, hey, we'd like to fix your website. I don't have a website for that. Go away. But that is perfectly legal. Government doesn't care as long as you're not remaking it into something horrible. Hi, we're the Census Bureau and we hate Swedes. Didn't do that. But that's okay. And if you're okay with people redistributing, that's what the podcast world can be. If you're not okay, you need to put disclaimers and say, don't redistribute this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really fascinating. Well, you should know that I certainly care. I'm one of the people in the podcast space that definitely cares. And we do live in a very troubling world for sure, a very troubling society. But I hope that Aaron's opinion and all the other great podcasters in the space, I hope that we all keep creating this stuff. And I really hope that eventually we'll look back and we'll say, wow, that was pretty crazy, but it also helped a lot of people. So I'm just here to help. And I really love learning from you and learning from others and telling stories and using my own voice to educate people. So all of this has been deeply fascinating. When you're not doing all this voice acting shenanigans, what are some of the other stuff you get into? You're quite a character. I'm sure you get into quite a lot of stuff when you are not voice acting.
Thank you. Well, there is the podcasting hobby that mostly happens on the weekends when the shows run. I take the shows, download them. Some of them need the music playlisted so that when I'm playing them back, the titles and artists show up on my podcast player, which I think is really cool. That has to happen manually. It's worth the hours of effort to make minutes of pleasure. Yay, I do that. And then I've got a family. I've got growing children. One's in high school, one's in college, but not for much longer. And we take them out and entertain them and feed them. I have a wife who needs entertaining and feeding as well. And the cool thing I've been doing lately is going to fan conventions on some weekends. Fan conventions, great to see people and meet people, and we have the opportunity to sell merchandise and autographs and basically make what would have been the residuals and royalties we never got from the cartoons we did. Anime and video games don't usually get residuals. And the stuff that was on TV back in the early 2000s didn't have residuals. But now we go to conventions, meet people, buy an autograph. Yay, I made some money from the work I did years ago.
Weird.
Those are fun.
That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. It's bizarre in that I've become the product in a different way. And you have to, you get people saying, $50 for an autograph. I'm not paying $50. Well, okay, can't help you. Have a free chat. Chatting is free. We've chatting. Thank you for coming by. But yeah, that's what I and a lot of my friends who I haven't seen in a while, I now meet them out on the road at conventions. And then other than that, we have a lovely vacation home in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, where we get to relax among the woodland creatures and bears and turkeys and foxes and fisher cats that screech at night.
Yeah, yeah. You could say, I don't know, if someone's so against giving you $50 for an autograph, you could say, whoops, well, we're out of, let me just stop this. You could say, I don't know if you've ever wanted to do this type of thing, but you could say, well, I'm giving a certain percentage of my proceeds to some sort of charity that like helps people get into podcasting or get into voice acting, or, there probably are like little creative kind things to encourage, to like soften it for them and say, well, this is a charity event, Yeah. I was at a charity event just a couple weekends ago, and it cost, $10 for someone to come into our festival and see what's going on at our fair, let's say. Do you know how many people will have a temper tantrum over $10? Mm-hmm. That is funny. Okay. That is a experience. It's just $10. People still have temper tantrums.
There are those people, but then there are also people who apparently save up all year and bring stacks of cash to buy stuff from everyone there, that's delightful, both from being the guy selling the stuff, but seeing all my friends to my left and my right. They're all selling stuff, and someone is leaving with a truckload of merchandise from people they wanted to meet. So that's really cool too.
That's super cool. Yeah, there's a couple of funny things, two little private things I'll share with you over on Messenger off air, but before I do, I just want to say, Mr. Mike Pollock, you are forever welcome here on Aaron's Opinion. I love learning from you, and I love your voices, and most of all, I love your personality. I would never want AI to take over what you do, because you're you, and I want you in the industry. I mean that from
Thank you. One of the things when I'm recording even a boring commercial or some narration, little sparks of magic, and I think, that's human creativity. That is me. AI
that's
can't
us.
that.
That's us.
Yeah. there is a human component. And sorry, AI, unless your programmers are just as brilliant as we are. No.
Yeah. Yeah. If you, Mike Pollock, can ask me Aaron's opinion, Aaron Richmond, only one more question to really make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster. What do you really want to ask me? And I know you can come up with a question.
Mm-hmm. You getting good numbers from your podcast? A lot of listeners? I mean, you're going to get more listeners than my private podcast with an audience of 2, but are people tuning in for Aaron's opinion?
I'm very appreciative of that because it turns out that not many of them do around the world, but we have people all over the world who appreciate what we do. So I'm more concerned about creating a product for the future that people look backwards and appreciate. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we do get
something to be
downloaded.
said for loyalty. If you got, a handful of loyal listeners are better than 100 people who said tune in once, never, not again.
Yeah, because that's the thing with it. You'll always have people that'll watch you once, but the loyal people are the ones here in Aaron's opinion that we want. Yeah. So
yeah, when I'm working, I love repeat business. If a client likes my work well enough to call me in again for either more of the same project or a completely different project, that's a win. Like, cool.
I believe next part before we go, this is totally up to you. We do have a couple people in the virtual audience, as you saw. They probably have questions. It's up to you. Do you want me to unmute their microphone so they could ask you something, or
Sure.
What do you think? All right,
yeah,
sure.
Dinner's kind of waiting, but we got 10 minutes.
Sure. No, let's give it a. I always leave that up to the guests because hey, some guests aren't comfortable with that. And okay, let's go with. Okay, this is the person that this one, Aaron. Aaron Kolonowski. Okay, Aaron Kolonowski, go ahead. I'm sure you have a question. One question, though, please.
Okay. So, Mike, it's a pleasure speaking with you again. My question for you is, what were some of your favorite TV shows growing up?
Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends, which went through various names. The acting, phenomenal. The script writing, hysterical. I had the pleasure of talking to the entire living cast when I was in high school and a very resourceful and annoying teenager. We were doing a radio show. I was in high school. I was working at a college radio station doing a call-in quiz show. We were all big fans of Rocky and Bullwinkle, and we had a little running gag, stupid catchphrase that we did. We tried to collect celebrities, and I said, I'll bet if I try hard enough, I could find celebrities. This was well before the internet. It was me. The yellow pages were actually directory assistants. I was resourceful enough to find a way to hack into our school's phone system to make long distance calls. I brought my little old school suction cup telephone recorder that you stick onto the telephone handset and my crappy tape recorder. And I found the agents for Bill Scott, June Foray, and Paul Frees and called their agents, who, it was a different time. They gave me their home phone numbers. I called them all at home. Hello, you don't know me, but I'm a big fan. I'm in high school. I have a college radio show. Could you please say your character's doing our catchphrase? And they did. And that's something that now in the days of the internet, where I know that where this stuff can go and get distributed in the wrong ways, the stuff that I wouldn't do if a fan calls me because it's not my character. These folks have all been retired from their characters. This was a little different, but they're all so nice, so generous. Paul Frees, very old and not with much breath, and his weren't great. But Bill and June, delightful, just so kind, so generous. Didn't need to be, and that was a thrill.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Excellent. All right, one more.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, one more here. Okay, let's see here. All right. Next one, last one. Preston, go. If he wants to ask something. Preston, I unmuted you if you want to ask. In the meantime, so if someone wants to get in touch with Mike Pollock, how would they do that?
My website's there at itsamike.com. It's not particularly interactive. These days, X, formerly known as Twitter, is where I usually end up most of the time, at It's a Mike. I'm on Instagram because I have to be, mike.pollock. I'm at Facebook at It's a Mike. I'm running out of room for friends. You can follow me there. But Twitter is still even as dicey as Twitter has become. Twitter is where I spend most of my time as far as responding to people.
All right. All right.
Okay,
All
I
right.
got the button to work.
Oh, you're fine,
Excellent.
Preston. Okay, Mike, he's Preston. Go, Preston. Ask your one question. You're gonna take us out of here tonight. Go, Preston.
Yep, I'll make it quick. What has been your favorite acting gig so far? You know, in your many years in the business.
You're going to hate this answer, but as I love to say, it's always going to be the next one. I don't even know what the next one is right now, but I love doing what I do so much that I never get bored, but I always want to know what the next thing is going to be. And that's the joy of what I do. I hardly ever know what I'm doing beyond next week. And I love whatever that's going to be.
That is
Makes
such
sense.
such a beautiful and brilliant way to end a beautiful, beautiful episode. Absolutely, everybody. Well, Mike, we'll be in touch soon over on Messenger. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to join me. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to learn from you more. So just keep up your great work, keep acting, and thank you so much. Everybody who participated in the studio, thanks so much. Remember, join my email list, join all the Facebook groups, as I say on my intros and outros. It would help you get into the studio because people want to say, how do I get in here? Well, listen, thanks so much, everybody. Keep acting, keep podcasting, and take care and be well. We will be back soon. Help one person today. Help 1 million people tomorrow. If you're still surviving on YouTube, thanks so much. We're glad we're glad you were here. Like the video, tickle that bell notification to know when we go live next, right here on YouTube. And of course, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back very soon.